I think the worst investigation I ever worked on seemed like your basic proof of infidelity job at first. We got a call from a client who thought his wife was cheating on him with the guy she worked with. He was away on business a lot and he'd had his suspicions for some time, but to get solid evidence, he called us. I guess some of you might be asking, why not just set up nanny cams or go through her phone to find the receipts? Well, there's a very simple explanation for that. Digital literacy. The client was in his 60s, but his wife was in her 20s. He knew she was cheating, but he just couldn't get that clean break divorce without evidence of prenup breaking infidelity. And when it came to getting a hold of that evidence, his wife always seemed to be 2 steps ahead. He said that when he first suspected his wife of having her boyfriend over to their place, he installed nanny cams to try and catch them in the act. And then somehow, they figured out the cameras were there and just changed the venues so they wouldn't get caught. Next thing, he tried stealing her phone, thinking he'd have time to guess the password and go through her emails and whatnot. She had it bricked before he even got a chance to try, and some tech kid wanted 4 figures to break past the security to retrieve all the data stored on the thing. We only asked him for half the figure to get us photographic evidence of an intimate rendezvous. Nothing salacious, of course, but incriminating enough to get him that swift and uncostly divorce he wanted so bad. The wife wasn't dumb. She stayed away from her boyfriend while hubby was in town. But you know what they say, when the cat's away, the mice will play. So to help catch her, hubby plans a fake business trip but doesn't even leave the city, stays in this nice hotel downtown. He then pays us to tail his wife while demanding updates every 5 minutes. And so that was me for 5 nights of my life, following this broad and her boyfriend around the city while my partner sat in the passenger seat taking pictures wherever they went. Every night, he'd take her out to his condo in the suburbs, then every morning, he'd drive her back home. They had no clue that they were being followed, especially at night when it was dark and the places they went were high traffic. I was on the night team, 8 p.m. till 8 a.m., and since the boyfriend drove the target back home so early, my partner and I would be there to see it, bleary-eyed and wired on Dunkin' coffees. But then this one morning, Loverboy came out all alone, looking like he hadn't slept a wink all night, but was somehow headed to the gym all bright and early. Guy had a hoodie and shorts on, then after tossing a very full-looking gym bag into the trunk of his car, he took off. At first, my partner and I are all jokes. I woke him up, pointed to our guy, then probably made some inappropriate joke about how he and the client's wife had been up all night. Obviously, we recognized that this was slightly a different routine for them, but the significance of it was totally lost on us until much later that day. Like I said, my partner and I were on night duties, so maybe an hour or so after spotting our red-eyed lover boy walking out of his condo alone, we handed over to the day team. We went home, got some sleep, then once we were ready to go again, I got in touch with the day team to find out where they were so we could switch over. To my amazement, they were still parked outside of Loverboy's condo. He hadn't returned home from work, and as far as they knew, our client's wife hadn't left the condo either. Our day team figured the pair of them had a heavy night of drinking and dancing, among other things, but then by the time 8 p.m. came around and neither the wife nor her boyfriend had been spotted, they started to wonder if something was going on. They told us all that, but granted, it was only maybe 8 p.m. at the time. The wife could have been lying in bed all day, stuffing her face with cheese doodles while her boyfriend was off doing whatever. I remember telling my partner, $20 says he's back before dark. Guy must be running on fumes already. And a few hours later, I was handing over that 20, still looking at the guy's empty parking spot. We didn't have anything else to do but sit there in our car, watching the condo and any signs of the wife. She was our follow, not her boyfriend, and if at any point we felt like we needed to track him to find her, then we'd deal with that situation as we came to it. So for the second night in a row, we sat outside Loverboy's condo, bored out of our skulls. Then, since we were almost constantly in touch with the client, and we were obliged to be frank regarding the status of our investigation, we had to level with them. There had been no sign of his wife or her boyfriend for 24 hours, give or take, any longer, and we have to consider the possibility that they knew that they were being followed and given us the slip. The client basically told us, okay, keep me updated, and then left us to do our thing. We waited all night, but still, there was no sign of either the target or her boyfriend. So by that point, we're thinking the wife had tricked us into waiting there while she snuck out a back door or something. We called our boss, and he agreed that we should go check out the client's home to see if there was any activity there. You know, like a bedroom or hallway light on, any indicator that she'd gone back there instead. There was no sign of anyone there, but soon after, it was no longer our problem. The day team took over for the next 12 hours, and it was our turn to get some well-deserved rest. Then, come 8 p.m. and our handover, we learned that there had been no activity at the client's house, but no activity at the boyfriend's condo either. The day team had tried a bunch of other places too, all regular hangouts of Loverboy and our client's wife, but there was no sign of them there either. That meant 36 hours of no contact, which is not what our clients pay us for. But then right as we're trying to think of a way to get back on track, we get a call from our boss. The client had reached out with some real concerning news. His wife had been due to meet a friend for a dinner date, but hadn't showed. Equally concerned, her friend had called her husband, our client, saying that she hadn't texted over any kind of cancellation and wasn't answering any calls either. Obviously, the loss of contact was concerning, but having one of her friends being on the verge of reporting her missing, that suggested a whole other level of urgency was required. We had to make sure that she wasn't still in Loverboy's condo. The only question was, how? Since it was only a few minutes past 9, I figured that I might be able to catch the building superintendent so I could run an old scam on them and try to get a look inside the room. I told my partner to stay put, got out of the car, then just walked right up to the apartment building and tried to open the door. To my luck, and his misfortune, they had the poor superintendent guy doubling as security, so as soon as I started loudly trying to open the door without a key, he came running to see who I was. I started explaining that I was looking for a friend of mine, how I hadn't seen him in a few days and how I was worried about him. The guy started giving me all that, I can't let you in without prior permission. But I turned the Hollywood up to 11 and started giving the guy this whole sob story about how he'd recently been diagnosed with cancer and was taking it real hard. That and his mom was in the hospital with a busted hip, having fallen down the stairs when she heard the news and fainted. I laid it on thick for the guy, said whatever tear-jerking thing came to mind, and in the end, he agreed to show me into Loverboy's apartment, so long as it was under his strict supervision. Mission accomplished, right? If the wife was in there, I could say that I was mistaken and that I must have given the wrong address. Sure, that was getting a little too close to the target for comfort, but these weren't your regular circumstances anymore. The client wasn't just concerned for his wife's fidelity anymore. He had a bad feeling that she might have stolen a bunch of jewelry from him, then ran off with Loverboy after losing their tail. He hadn't told us that was a possibility before, but when he did, it made the situation time-critical, so to speak. Anyway, we head up the stairs to the second floor, and the guy lets me into the condo that we've been staking out. He opens the door for me, reminding me that he's about to tail me everywhere, then off we go into the TV room, the kitchen, and eventually the bedroom. I went to open it, and found the door was locked. I call out, not specifically to the wife, just to anybody, but no one replies. The guy then starts saying how no one's home, but I start explaining how we definitely need to get that bedroom door open because I'm scared that my buddy has done something terrible, either to himself or someone else. He says he doesn't have the keys to the doors inside of these units, which was understandable, but then as he was talking, he suddenly stops, his eyes go wide, and he points down at my hand. There was blood, like old half-dried stuff smeared across my lower fingers and palm, all from where I'd gripped the door handle. And my adrenaline starts pumping. I tell the guy to call the cops because either they're going to have to arrest me for criminal damage or they're going to want to see whatever the hell was behind that locked bedroom door. I knew I'd have to stay anyway. I had friggin' forensics all over my hands, so when the guy agreed to go get the cops, I just hung out in the hallway outside and called my partner to let him know things had taken a real dark turn up there. We suspected the worst, but having it confirmed didn't make it any easier. The cops arrived with the whole team. They got the bedroom door open, and there she was, lying on the floor, strangled. We didn't find out until much later on, but the wife had actually tried to break it off with Loverboy after a night on the town. She thought one last blowout would soften the blow. But after too many cocktails, the guy wasn't anywhere near as level-headed as she figured he might be, and somehow he came to the decision that if he couldn't have her, no one could. That morning when we saw him, wearing his workout gear and looking like he hadn't slept, he'd murdered our client's wife less than an hour before. We were sat there in our car, having no clue that a murder was happening less than 100 yards away. It makes me sick to think about, even all these years later, knowing that we were so close, but there was nothing we could have done to stop it. I heard Loverboy went to prison for first-degree murder and that the rich client remarried not long after. And I have a ton of stories from my time as a PI, but that's by far the one that haunts me the most. Last year, my sister and I and my nieces traveled to northern Mexico to seek asylum in the United States. The bus rumbled along the highway as we finally neared Matamoros. It had taken us months to get there from Honduras. All we wanted was safety, a chance to live without fear. It was just after 7:30 when it happened when, out of nowhere, I heard the shots. And at first I didn't really understand. I thought the noise was firecrackers or something of that nature, and then I saw them. Trucks swarming around us, cutting us off from every direction. As we got closer, the sound of their gunfire was deafening and panic spread like wildfire through the bus. I held my breath as armed, masked men in military uniforms forced their way inside, and one of the men yelled, "Identification," and everyone on the bus began searching for theirs. My heart pounded as I fumbled for my papers, praying that they wouldn't hurt anyone, but they weren't there to check IDs. They were hunting for us. They were hunting for migrants. They dragged me off the bus along with many others, including my niece, who cried as she was let off outside. Mexican cartels go after Honduran migrants because they're easy targets. Since migrants are often on the move without much protection, cartels take advantage by extorting them, forcing them to work, smuggling drugs, or pulling them into their operations. It's all about preying on people in a very tough spot. And after the men took us, they split us up. I was crammed into a truck with my niece and others, while my sister and her older daughter were shoved into another vehicle. I couldn't even process what was happening. All I could think about was staying alive. For 4 days, we were held captive. The kidnappers took my phone, my cash, even my shoes. They shoved us into a ranch house so packed with other migrants that sometimes there wasn't even space to sit down. We didn't have any food or water, and rats and cockroaches crawled all around us, and every moment stretched on endlessly. For my sister, her situation was even worse. Her youngest daughter had been separated from her, and the kidnappers threatened her life in order to intimidate her. They called our family back in Honduras, demanding thousands of dollars in ransom. "Pay, or you'll never see her again," I remember them saying. My sister told me later how helpless she felt. She couldn't stop imagining the worst. Her little girl terrified, alone, or worse. Back in Honduras, our relatives scrambled to gather money. My brother-in-law organized the quick sale of his and my sister's house, but they also had to borrow from people to raise the full ransom amount. The kidnappers wanted the money sent to bank accounts that we later realized were in Peru, and in the end, we paid them about $7,000 USD. On the 5th day, our kidnappers loaded all of us back onto a bus, and I didn't know what was happening, and I was convinced that they were going to kill us and dump us somewhere. Instead, they drove us to a parking lot near the border and left us there, and I remember one of them saying, "Wait here, they'll come for you." And then after that, they drove off and disappeared. Around 10 minutes later, the authorities arrived, and they told us later that they had found us after an anonymous call, and they also said that the massive manhunt launched after our kidnapping forced the captors to release us. Even as we were freed, I couldn't stop thinking about the others. The ranch where I was held still had dozens of migrants crammed inside. In my nightmares, I can still hear their voices and their cries. And now me, my sister, and my nieces are safe in the United States, but that fear still lingers on. We fled Honduras to escape danger, only to face something just as terrible on the journey. All we wanted was a chance to live without fear, and yet, for so many like us, that dream remains just out of reach. Autumn is an amazing season. I love the way the leaves change on the trees. I love all the activities in the fall, like hiking, apple picking, pumpkin picking, and even celebrating Halloween. October holds a very special place in my heart because that's when my husband and I got married. This October will already be our 15th wedding anniversary. As great as all of that is, the story I want to share is not a great memory, but a horrible nightmare that nearly ruined this time of year for me. We had just celebrated our first wedding anniversary the weekend prior, so the next weekend we planned on taking it easy and just having a fun, relaxing afternoon. We decided to go pumpkin picking since it was a beautiful day and we were both off of work. We spent a few hours at the pumpkin patch, and it was one of those big ones that had a ton to do, so we weren't just picking pumpkins the entire time. We watched the live band and had some hot coffee and apple cider donuts. When we were getting ready to leave, I could tell my husband wasn't ready to call it a day quite yet. I asked him if there was anything else he wanted to do before we headed home. He smiled and asked if we could go for a little hike. Something to know about me is that I'm not the biggest fan of hiking. I don't mind being outside, but the idea of trekking through the woods with bugs and animals is not my thing. But I know my husband loves that sort of thing, so he suggested visiting one of the local sites near the pumpkin patch since we were already out that way, roughly an hour from where we lived. I agreed to his suggestion since I knew the site that he was talking about and it wasn't that intense of a hike. We left the pumpkin patch and headed for our autumn hike at around 2 in the afternoon, and we planned on heading home around 3:30. When we turned into the parking lot, I could see that my husband was upset. The park was closed for some sort of renovations, I guess, and they had a big sign up that said, "We'll open next May." Instead of turning around in the parking lot, he parked and told me that we had to check out the sign up close. As we were walking to the start of the trail, he pointed out that there were several cars parked in the lot. His logic was that even though the park was closed, it wasn't technically in season, and we could probably just walk on the trails anyway. He started to nudge me a little bit and said that we should just check out the first bit of the trail. He kept pointing to the other cars and saying that other people were there for his defense, and I gave up the argument and told him that we could just check out the first few minutes of the trail, but then I wanted to leave. I could tell he was excited. This type of rule breaking, though not serious, was still way out of character for us. We had to jump this chain link fence to get onto the trail and past a bunch of construction equipment. I was already regretting my decision at this point. No trespassing signs were everywhere, and I was fully expecting to be confronted by either a worker or maybe even a police officer. A few minutes into the walk, my husband pointed out this little shack out of the trail a little bit. It wasn't like an old abandoned shack. It was actually the opposite. It was this strange little building that was clearly almost brand new. Most likely it was some sort of break room for the workers, I guess. My husband wanted to check it out, so the string of bad decisions continued. As we approached the building, my husband pointed out to me that it was a portable building. I'd never seen anything like that before, so I thought it was pretty cool. And he explained to me that it was almost like a trailer. It didn't have any plumbing or AC, but it was a sturdy structure to eat and take a break from the elements. When we were only 10 feet away, we could hear muffled voices on the inside of the structure. Not wanting to bring attention to ourselves, we decided to just move quickly towards the building instead of away. I know that sounds backwards, but we were walking towards the front door. If we turned around and ran, it would for sure bring attention to ourselves. That's why we sort of ducked and ran toward the side of the building so we could figure out how to get away without getting caught, you know. I thought right away that we were done for. I assumed that it was either a construction crew inside the building or a park ranger. While we were hiding on the side of the building, my husband was motioning for me to be quiet while he tried to listen. He's considerably taller than me, so he practically had his ear on the window. I was too short to reach the window, so I couldn't hear what they were saying. I could only hear the muffled tones of the voices, and they sounded angry. My husband then made a decision to sort of cup his hands and look through the window. In all the years I've known this man, I had never seen the expression that he made that day. I watched the colors sort of just run away from his face, and seconds later, he ducked down with some speed. I could see the fear in his eyes, but even worse than that, I could hear the terror in his voice. He looked right at me, voice shaking, and said, "We need to go right now." He grabbed my arm and guided me as we ran back to the trail and then back to our car. I barely had the door shut and he was already speeding out of the parking lot. He continued checking in his rearview mirror every few seconds. The entire drive home, I kept asking him what he saw, but he wouldn't tell me. It clearly wasn't a worker or an officer because his reaction to that would not be this bad. When we got home, he immediately went back outside and called the police. He went as far as sitting in his car to call the police so I wouldn't hear him. And the worst part of all of this, though, I still don't know what he saw that afternoon. That night he begged me to stop asking and made me promise that I wouldn't bring it up again. And after a little battle, I finally agreed. And all these years later, I still don't know. I've remained true to my word by not asking him. Believe it or not, this story gets even worse. And whatever he saw that day affected him so badly that he hasn't slept right ever since, it seems. He won't talk to anybody about it, and he's learned to live with his messed up sleep cycle. And he blames his insomnia on work and stress, but it didn't start till very clearly after that incident. Every night he gets in bed with me. Once I'm asleep, he'll just sort of get up and sit in the living room all night long. He won't turn the TV on, and he doesn't play video games, and he doesn't even read a book, it seems. He just sort of faces the door and remains there until he eventually passes out on the couch or his alarm goes off. So whatever happened that afternoon, I just hope that someday my husband finds the peace of mind that he deserves.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. You're sleeping with your best friend's mother? My mom screamed at me the moment I walked into the house. This is not what it looks like. I'm not just hooking up with her, Mom. I'm in love with her, I said in a calm voice. The cat was already out of the bag. What use would it be to try to seal the bag now? So I told her the truth. And what do you know about love? You're 16, Xavier, and she's 40. She crossed her arms and said all of this angrily. But I do love her, Mom, and she loves me too, I said. Yeah, hell she does. She doesn't love you, she's using you. The anger in her voice was so strong that it was starting to scare me. But I kept standing my ground and told her that if she does anything, I would leave the house. She started laughing in anger, which was even scarier. Then suddenly she stopped and said, "You think after pulling that stunt, you have the luxury to threaten me like that? You don't get to leave the house by yourself, Xavier. I'm kicking you out." After saying that, she stormed upstairs, while I stood there frozen, unable to believe my ears. I went to my room and started packing my stuff with the speed of a sloth, hoping she would change her mind and stop me. But she didn't. She didn't even look me in the eye when I was leaving the house, let alone speak to me. I had nowhere else to go, not even to Miss Henderson's house because her husband still lived with her. She had made a promise to me that she would get a divorce from him once she sorted the matters about her grandfather's will, which stated that she would get the properties if she had stayed married to Mr. Henderson 7 years after his death, and it had only been 5 years. When I told her about my mother finding out about us as a result and me getting kicked out, she asked me to manage for a few days until she figured some things out. The first night, I spent sleeping on my house's porch, and around 3 a.m., I even saw Mom peeking, but she never asked me to come back in. The next day, my little brother came and told me that Mom wants me to go sleep somewhere else. So I roamed around the next day with hopes in my heart that either my mom or Miss Henderson would call me, but none of them did. I understood Mom was punishing me, but why was she ignoring me? She was the one who manipulated me into sleeping with her the first time, and that was not it. She was the one who persisted that we keep doing this, and that was the reason I fell for her. I had already spent 2 days sleeping on the street, but I was not going to sleep another day like that. So I decided to go to her house and confront her. When my affair with her wasn't discovered by my mom, I used to sneak into her house through the back door. So I thought of doing the same thing and went to use the back of her house. That's when I witnessed something really disturbing. She was kissing Jackson. He was a friend of Harry, her son, and mine. The three of us used to have sleepovers before my affair started, but now I know that it was not just me she was sleeping with. As I was thinking that while watching them, she pulled out a knife and stabbed him. I was dumbfounded and horrified as I stood there frozen. I always knew she was a violent person, but I never knew she could go to the extent to hurt someone. As she was stabbing him, I heard her saying with the calmest expression on her face, "Only if you could have kept your mouth shut." I kept hiding there beside the window as I saw her dragging the body around and taking it somewhere else. I figured she was about to come to her backyard to bury the body, so I sneakily moved to the other side of her house from where I could see what she was doing. I was surprised her just leaving the body outside, going back in, and that was when I noticed her wearing rubber gloves. All at the same time, it hit me. She had planned it all along, and whatever plan she had made for me and Jackson must have ruined it. I knew she lacked empathy and was manipulative and aggressive, but this was beyond my imagination. She was a real sociopath. I couldn't just leave my friend's body like that, so I called 911 and went to check on him. Just when I thought he was dead, I felt his distinct faint breathing. Police had already told me that they would be here in 10 minutes, but I was just not strong enough to handle this on my own, so I called Mom. After the third ring, she picked up. "Mom." I started crying after saying that, and she got worried. I told her about Jackson, and she immediately drove over to where I was. But before she could reach, Miss Henderson saw me and came outside. "Oh my God, Xavier, what happened? Is this Jackson? Who did this to him?" As she was asking me all of these questions with absolutely no remorse on her face, I felt disgusted by her. "Don't worry, Miss Henderson, he was alive. He'll tell us himself about what happened once he wakes up," I said with tears dripping down my eyes. That was when my mom's car reached and she rushed to us. "Get away from here!" She pushed her and squatted down to check his pulse. "He's alive, but not for long. We have to hurry and take him to the ER," she said. By the way, did I mention earlier that my mom was a doctor? I followed her advice and helped her carry him to the car. That was also when the police van showed up. As we put Jackson in the car to drive him to the hospital while one of the officers accompanied us, Miss Henderson was getting arrested. She looked at me with disbelief. Guess she couldn't believe her crime was witnessed by someone, let alone her teenage lover. But I didn't care to spare her another look. As we drove to the hospital, I kept thinking that my mom was right all along. She had been manipulating and using me all this time for her selfish gains. And I was just too stupid to notice that.
When I was younger, every summer and nearly every New Year, my family would pack the car and set off on a road trip to visit our relatives in Mexico. It was a tradition, one filled with excitement, snacks, and long hours on the road. Those trips always felt like an adventure. We never had any problems, at least until one particular trip we went on when I was 8 years old. As usual, we left our home in North Texas at around 6 p.m. The plan was the same as always, drive through the night and arrive at our destination by the morning. Around 2 a.m. we crossed the border into Mexico, but that's when things took a very strange turn. Driving on the long, empty stretch of freeway in the middle of the desert was nothing unusual. It was pitch black outside except for the twinkling stars above and the occasional silhouette of a cactus. The road was desolate and other cars were few and far between. I was in that half-asleep, half-awake state that kids are often in during long car rides, faintly aware of my surroundings as I drifted in and out of consciousness. And that's when I heard my mom speak up, and her voice low but tense. "Miguel," my father, "the car behind us, it's been following us since we left Laredo." My dad glanced in the rearview mirror and shrugged it off before saying something like, "A lot of cars use this road. It's probably just heading to Reynosa or another town." My mom didn't seem convinced, and she kept glancing back. I could feel her unease, and it made me nervous too. My siblings and I, now fully awake, became fixated on this mysterious car. We peeked through the gaps in the luggage piled high in the rear of the car, trying to get a better look, and it was hard to tell, much in the dark, but those headlights stayed stubbornly behind us, mile after mile. I remember how nervous we all got when my mom said, "He's getting closer." And this time, her voice was sharp with fear. We turned again to watch, and sure enough, the car was inching closer to ours. Too close. The headlights blazed, glaring into our car like an interrogation lamp. "He's too close, Miguel," my mom said firmly, her voice rising slightly. My dad didn't panic, but I could see his grip tighten on the wheel. He didn't slow down, didn't stop, and didn't speed up either. He just kept driving steadily, and the car behind us followed, unwavering. The tension of the car was suffocating, and for the next 30 minutes the car behind us played a sort of cruel game. It would back up just enough to give us a false sense of relief, only to speed up and press its blinding headlights right against our car again. It felt intentional, like the driver knew how terrified we were and was enjoying it, and I held my breath every time it got closer, my heart pounding in my chest. Then, up ahead, my mom spotted something. A police car parked on the side of the road. "Pull over, Miguel. Right in front of the police. Do it now," she commanded. Without hesitation, my dad complied, pulling our car to a stop directly in front of the parked police cruiser. The mysterious car didn't stop. It sped past us, disappearing into the darkness ahead. The policeman approached our car looking understandably confused, and my mom wasted no time explaining, her words tumbling out in a sort of frantic rush. She described how the car had been following us, tailgating us, and behaving aggressively, and the officer did take her seriously. He explained that robbers and carjackings were common on those deserted highways, especially in the dead of night. Gangs and criminals often targeted unsuspecting travelers, and hearing this sent chills down my spine. I clutched my seatbelt tighter as my mom's fears were validated, and to reassure us, the officer offered to drive behind us for a while to ensure that we were safe. We gratefully accepted his help, feeling a wave of relief as the cruiser pulled out behind us. And 10 minutes later, our relief turned to dread. There on the side of the road was the car, the same car that had been following us for miles. It was parked in the shadows, almost like it was waiting. My mom's breath caught and my dad tensed. None of us said a word, and we all knew that we had narrowly escaped something far worse that night. The police cruiser stayed behind us for the next stretch of the journey, and eventually, the tension in the car eased. But that image of the car waiting in the darkness has stayed with me ever since. And to this day, I wonder what would have happened if my mom hadn't spotted that police car in time.